Welcome to episode number 16, regular guitar hang with Nick Granville in Wellington, myself in Auckland. It used to be weekly, but now we just like see how we go.
Yeah.
You want to tell us what you've been up to lately? It's been a while, so you fill us in.
Yeah. So I was just in the studio tonight. A buddy of mine's doing a record, so
Nice.
he asked me to come in and just sort of be a fly on the wall, and he was tracking some guitars and tracking some keyboards and stuff. So he was just wanted me to kind of be an extra set of ears and involved with it. So that was really cool to go and see and do.
Nice.
And for the last week, I've been on the road with Corey Christiansen while he's been out here
Oh, sweet.
playing with the Roger Fox Big Band. And although it's kind of a somber moment, but nonetheless, I got to spend a week with Corey, which was awesome. We did a bunch of things. He did a bunch of concerts, so I was sort of driving him around, looking after him. And then he did a workshop, and I ended up playing for most of that workshop as well, which was fun. Got to play together a little bit, and then we went on a fishing trip because he's
cool.
into fly fishing, and so am I. So yeah, so it's been great actually. It's been really good. He's a great guitar player, so it's
sure.
been really nice to learn from him and watch how he does things. And yeah, he's great.
I've had a bit of time to fiddle around with stuff in the studio. I have a new lens, as you can see, but every now and then I come back and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I keep on discovering the new things with the same old gear. So I've got this
Yeah.
Marshall, which was it's a late 70s, I think, 2203, but got modded by John Suhr. So it was a friend of mine at the time who he had a custom audio 3 plus SE preamp, and he wanted a power amp for that. And Sir told him the best power amp is an old Marshall. They can mod it with a loop, and then you can use that as a power amp. So the bro
Sure.
went the full hog, and he found an old Marshall and got it sent to Sir. And somewhere down the line, he found a custom audio PT100, the first edition. And he was really happy with that. So he was like, hey, I've got this Marshall sitting at Sir. Do you want to pick that up? So I was like, cool, I'll grab that off you and then, have him do the Landau mod on it. So I ended up buying it while I was in India and got it sent to my parents' house in New Zealand. And in the interim, I ended up getting an OD100 myself. So the sound has just been, sitting at the parents' house. And when I came back to New Zealand, I was like, oh, I remember I've got an old Marshall sitting here somewhere. And, right enough, opened up the cardboard box and pulled this guy out. So it's basically like a 800, but all the horrible frequencies are taken out. Because I've always found like with an 800, it sounded really good with a Les Paul. With a Strat, you kind of have to do a few things like hit it with some pedals and so on and so forth. So this is like right off the bat, no pedals, like that's what
And
it
you're
sounds.
running through your aux box.
Yeah, Sir
not aux
reactive
box,
load
was it?
and into
Sir reactive load.
the aux stomp.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of got that typical Marshall snarl, but any of that ice pick frequencies, and it does clean up really well, on the single coils especially. So then what you do is you start putting pedals in front to color that, bass crunchy tone. So the RC booster, which is, the old faithful, you'll hear the hiss, by the way. You can turn the volume way down. The Roger Mayer Voodoo one, which is like a really good clean sound, isn't it?
Yeah. Totally.
You can almost even play, that sort of thing.
Man, some
with
of the
it.
best clean tones are just from turning down like that, aren't they?
Pretty much.
As long as you have a decent volume pot on your guitar.
You
can be
hear a
magic.
bit of noise, but what's a good guitar tone without a little bit of noise?
It's like breathing, isn't it?
Pretty much. The old tube screamer for the chugga chugga. Let's pop.
So you're using the tube screamer there, like we've talked before about essentially tightening up the bottom end and giving more mid-range kick, isn't it?
Pretty much. And if you don't want the bottom end chopped off and the mid-range pushed that much, the Maxon SD line is the one you'd want. Listen to that low end and the tube screamer. That's the SD9.
Yeah. Different times, aren't they?
Then there's what do you have the old Octafuzz? It's almost got that ring mod thing if you hit like.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting one I found is the Boss CS2, the compressor. I think yeah, that's the one. So it's a little bit woofy, like with high gain, but then you pull back and like without it.
Yeah, so you're slamming the front of it with a compressor, essentially, aren't you?
Adds a little
Kind of
more
like the
sustain.
principle of using a boost in a similar kind of way, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Except it's probably in some ways turning your single coils into humbuckers, right? Because it's compressing. It would force the mid range to be. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, a little bit of it. I mean, I've always normally heard people say you have to put your compressor after your drive. That's normal, like in the studio.
No, before.
Yeah.
I love it before.
It does. It brings up a little bit of noise, obviously, because it's before the distortion. But then it sounds cool. Let's see, like even with your middle and bridge situation.
That's probably my favorite setting on a Strat.
That sort of thing. So you wouldn't normally think of like a driven Marshall to have those kind of tones available to you, but here we
Oh,
are.
I mean, Marshalls for the clean tone can be beautiful.
Yeah.
Like JTM 45 is not a high gain head.
Yep.
People think it is. They think Marshall and they think kind of rock, classic rock, high gain, and then they get a JTM 45 and they're like, oh, it's not that at all.
Yeah.
There's a blues guy in town. Dougal Spear is his name.
Okay.
And Dougal used to play a lot with one of this little, either a Little Laney or 30-watt combo, or he had the other amp he had was a. And he's still got it as a 65 Deluxe reissue.
Okay.
But he always used a Ross compressor. And of course, he was driving the amp hard. So essentially, it's compressor into overdrive.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember sitting in a bunch of times, and it was just such a fun sound. As soon as you hit that compressor on, just kind of made the whole thing go, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of pushed the whole thing really far forward.
And also, like,
hit
if
it
you're
hard.
trying to clean up, I think then the compressor catches all the peaks,
Yeah, exactly.
So you can,
Smooths it all out.
yeah, so effectively what you can do is put a volume pedal after the compressor and then use that to kind of rein in how hard the compressor is, hitting the amp.
It's funny because a lot of times people think of compressors for like funk music, right? Because that's one of the classics, right? To get that funk rhythm thing. But there's so many more uses to a compressor, I mean, I've shied away from a compressor for a long time, mostly because a lot of times it kind of squishes your guitar sound, you lose dynamics, but that can be a benefit too. So they're definitely a good tool. And I've been using them more and more since I've been using the Fractal, because using the Fractal stuff, I mean, it's not like I want to find a place for one more pedal on a pedal board.
Yeah.
It's all in the thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And there's another use for like the studio compressors, which would normally go after your mic preamp. That's a totally different place in the signal chain that they would come in. But those I find are more like you use them to color the sound a little bit, give it a little more oomph, but not really do the squash thing. The only time I do that is if I've got like a clean sound and maybe something like a DBX will give you that almost like that direct kind of compressed.
It's almost high fidelity,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
It's a high fidelity
Yeah.
kind of thing, which is different from and some of those compressor pedals, like I mentioned the Ross compressor, they were crappy pedals. They were not good pedals. People think they were high end or whatever, and because they're worth a lot of money now. They were not. They were just crappy pedals that did a thing that was cool.
Yeah.
Interesting that you mentioned about the SD9, because as soon as you said if you want the mid range. Little less mid range with all that punch, but still the bottom end. And I knew you were going to say the SD.
Yeah.
It's a classic, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Someone
It
was
is
selling
now.
a original Ibanez version on Facebook Marketplace recently, but those aren't true bypass. So I kind of
No.
one instance where the newer version is better than the original. Here's
And
another.
probably wanting a lot of money too, right?
Well, no, it was okay. Wasn't
Ah.
like one of those made in Japan DS ones, and they want $500 for it or some shit like that. I was like, nah,
Yeah, man,
never
I've seen some
mind.
crazy things where people are selling stuff, and I'm like, there was a TS10, the Ibanez, which weren't particularly great tube screamer, but John Mayer uses one now, so a lot of people are a lot of cats are hip to those ones,
Yeah.
and the dude put it on Trade Me for $1,200 to start with.
Wow.
And I was like, "Come on, man!" And then it became a grand, then it became 800, and then I think they came out with a reissue of it like
Yeah.
recently or something. All of a sudden, his prices had to come right down, and be more realistic. So
Yeah.
that's
I've
how it
seen
goes.
some ridiculous ones. Even though the old Vemiram Jan Rays now become like, some guys selling it for $600. I was like, shit, are they worth that much? I sold mine, I think, sometime last year or the year before. I mean, for me, like the RC booster was doing an equally good job, so didn't
Totally.
really need all the extra cash sitting on the pedal board.
Well, and sometimes too, sometimes the simplest, cheapest pedals are the ones. Those old Boss Blues drivers were
Yeah.
actually pretty good low gain boosts.
Yep.
The Tube Screamer Mini. I mean, those things are like $100 in New
That's
Zealand, and they sound great.
that's the Tube Screamer on my board. I saw one going for $50, and I was tempted to buy
Really?
another one.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you broke it, which you'd be pretty hard pressed to, you'd
Yeah.
probably be hammering in nails with that blimmin' thing before you break it.
Well, I
But
I actually
50
ended up
bucks.
breaking it for like a week because I was getting pissed off with the orange light. I was like, how can a green pedal have an orange light? It needs to have a green light.
Yeah.
So I put a green LED and I broke one of the traces. It took me a while to
Oh
figure
no.
what I had done, and then I was like, oh shit. So just soldered that back because it's those tiny SMD components. You can very easily wreck something. So yeah, luckily
You
it
can always
was.
run a wire from one trace to the other, though, anyway,
That's
if you
what
had
I
to,
end
right?
up doing in any case, yeah, because the
Yeah.
traces were like tiny. Here's something interesting as well. So right now, this is a vintage 30 cabinet. Right? I'm gonna just shut off the reverb so we can hear the
When you say a vintage 30, is that in your aux
in the
stomp,
aux,
your
yeah,
small
a vintage 30 model, shall we
model?
say? Yeah, yeah. Algorithm. It's not IR, or maybe they are using IRs, but it's bloody
I think
app.
they are IR based, aren't they? Sure.
I think there's probably like multiple IRs because you don't really get to move the mics. That's my only complaint with it. I would have liked to move the mics ever so slightly because you can kind of EQ it. But they have given you full featured EQ. So you
Oh,
can actually EQ each of the mics. So right now I've got a 57 and an MD421, which I stole from Brendan O'Brien. Apparently, there was a Friedman tone talk when he said, "Oh, that's like the classic Brendan O'Brien 57 and a 421." So I was like, I should try that, and it does sound really good. But here's the greenback cabinet. Suddenly, it sounds a little more, vintage or spongy or whatever compared to the more forward thing of the vintage 30. There's G12, the some Dumble kind of cab. I think it's a two rock G12 65 speaker, a little thicker mid range
I
compared to
like the
the
G12 65s.
yeah
I
compared
reckon
to the
they're good
vintage 30
speakers.
is like that's like it cuts through the mix, but sometimes you don't need to cut through. You just have so much space you can just get back a little bit and so that's what I would use. That's your 4x10 basement cab. So now I found this with some slapback makes a really cool blues tone. And then you chuck in that voodoo one, and it really makes that low end go like, and then cleans up pretty well. Here's a 1x12 Celestian Blue, which is cool. And finally, a 1x10 champ. I think we've gone through these cabs before, but with this amp, you can really, hear those differences loud and clear. That's as much as
People don't
copyright will
realize
allow.
that speakers and cabinets are like the
Yeah,
ultimate EQ, aren't they?
pretty much.
Changing I've actually been thinking about it with my little Victoria Tweed Deluxe about putting a different speaker in there. Mostly because that amp now is really a recording amp for me. I don't use it live so much. Most of the time it's the Fractal, or if I do use it, it's like an acoustic jazz, like a quieter level thing. You know what I mean? And I was actually thinking an Alnico speaker in there would be really nice,
Yeah, it would be
because the
sure.
speaker that's in there is an Eminence Legend, which when I bought that amp, I remember he sent me the wrong speaker.
Oh,
And he sent it over, and he was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry." He goes, "I've just read the list of the spec list again, and I saw that you'd asked for a Jansen Alnico."
hmm
He goes, "But the Eminence is literally my go-to speaker. That's why I just by default put it in there. And that's what I always do." So I actually bought a Weber Blue, the Weber version of the Blue Celestian Blue
hmm
Alnico, and the amp was like half the volume that I had before, literally half the volume. At half, it sounded sweet. It was a nice tone, but it was like half the volume. I was like, I'm not going to be able to gig this at all,
yeah,
And then so I went back to the Eminence, which actually sounds really good, but it had a lot more thick, low, mid. And I thought, man, maybe I should now that it's become a recording amp, use it for that. Because I mean, if I was going to gig with an amp anyway, I'd use my Bassman probably, because that's probably the best clean tone amp I've ever heard.
yeah. The only
When
thing
that
better is
thing's
two. And does it become
yeah.
bassmen then?
Yeah. Well, actually, funny enough, the Bassman and the Deluxe side by side, when I come out of my Flint pedal and I run them in stereo, which
uh,
the Flint actually, for some reason, has a stereo out that hum cancels. It's fine. And run out of that and run into both amps, and the 1x12 plus the 4x10s is
yeah.
pretty glorious.
I remember Matt Schofield saying, he's saying like a combination of, tens in one cab and 12s in the other, they kind of complement each other really
Well, I
nicely.
think Josh Smith does that too. He does I think he's been doing a Vox AC30 and a Super or something
Mm,
along those lines. But anyway, a combination like that, that's Fender and Vox. Because different characteristics that fill out frequencies together.
yeah.
It was an interesting. I saw an interesting thing of Tim Pierce today. I forget where I saw it, but he was talking about how back in the day, a lot of people adopted the stereo thing,
hmm
mostly because when they were tracking guitars in the studio, they were tracking the first guitar part that you put down. He thought really sounded really bland and mono,
Yeah.
and then you double it, and then okay, now it's stereo because it's two parts.
hmm
But a lot of the guys like him and Dan Huff and those guys were into the stereo rigs because that initial first take sounded huge with two amps,
Yeah.
two speakers, and I thought that's an interesting kind of place for it to have come from.
Yeah.
That
Even
guy's a legend,
even
really.
the John Sykes thing, I remember, they were tracking that Whitesnake album and they were having some issues with the guitar sound. And then Bob Rock was recording next door, and they asked him to, pop in and help out. So apparently, he keeps, one of the amps, the I think it was some sort of a Mesa Mark III or something like that. And they ran that out into a Lexicon PCM 41 delay, and then that into a second amp. So they were just using that delay to kind of, delay the second amp a little bit and add a bit of
Hmm.
modulation on it. And suddenly you get this huge ass, stereo guitar sound. But
And it's probably becoming line level out of that delay
yeah,
unit
out
too,
of the
right?
effects loop, pretty much.
So
Those
so
are,
coming out of that would be pretty loud into the other amps. It's probably hitting the other amp pretty hard too.
yeah. No, I think what happens is you come out of the effects, send out of one amp, run that into the
Yeah.
delay, and then that into the return of the second amp. So, you're not really
Also, both
adding.
amps are. I see.
But
Yeah.
you're just running line level throughout that delay, which is, I used to have one of those, like sold it like an idiot, just like, oh, there's too much gear lying around. I should just get rid of this. And then now I'm like, one of those. But
And I'm
anyway,
like that. I need to do a big purge and get rid of some stuff because I've got. I can't even. I'm starting to run out of space for everything.
yeah.
But then I'm like, do I really want to sell this?
When you should sell is when you open the pedal cover and then like pedals fall on you.
Yeah,
Then
that's happening as you can see on the shelf over there. They keep falling on the floor. Although I don't mind with pedals because pedals are only small. I'll stack them up, but amps has been the big one. I've got that Mesa Boogie, as you know, that's
Mhm.
sort of. I don't think I've turned it on for 6 months.
Yeah.
And sat there and it's kind of in the way. And my Victorias, I'm keeping them out in the hallway at the moment because there's, my wife probably is banging into them trying to get into the spare room and what have you. The cats probably want to claw them.
Yeah.
So
It's good you don't have one of
yeah.
those amps with us fur on it or something. You've
Yeah,
seen those.
exactly. I was actually thinking like an ideal combination might even be to sell my Bassman. I know, I know. It'll be one that'll be one I'll regret. But sell the Bassman and buy a vintage Princeton. Because if I had a vintage Princeton, that's the black panel era amp,
Yep.
that has that sparkly clean tone. And then I got my little Tweed Deluxe for the more tweedy kind of thing where you want to push it hard and get it growling a little bit, and that's pretty much all I'd need.
Yeah, I reckon though if you get a vintage Fender, then Simon's gonna be a really good friend to know.
Yeah, he's going to be making some money out of me. They
Yeah.
they do though. They become unreliable. It's one of the reasons I had an old Rocket amp back in the day. Did you ever have one of those? And
I've
it was
seen them.
really good.
Yeah, I've seen them floating around.
It was killer. It was basically a Mesa Boogie clone, and that thing sounded great. But it was unreliable. I was every second week would die on a gig, and I'd have to take it into an amp tech, and but boy, it sounded good. That thing was great, and I had one of those Boss rack. I think it was a GCX or G something X. It was like a just unit with the whole
GX
lot, all the
700, I
effects.
think.
GX 700, that's the one. Yeah, and it was really good. I used that into the Rocket,
Mm-hmm.
and that was my sound though. I was really happy with that. It just worked. Yeah,
Yeah.
no pedals, just literally those two, and a MIDI controller to control the Boss.
Yeah, speaking of
Mm.
pedals, just when you think I have enough amps, I saw Bogner Alchemist come up for $300. And I'm
Yeah,
like sorely tempted. I think it was 375 he wanted, but it's got a Fender speaker in it. And those amps came with a vintage 30. So what I reckon is someone with a Fender, maybe a Hot Rod or something, decided, hey, I'd like to have that vintage 30 in the Fender and put the Fender speaker in the
it
in the
swapped them over.
Alchemist. That's exactly what happened. So I asked the guy, he
Hmm.
said, I don't really know, like, if it's the original license. Definitely not. But if you want to sell the amp without the speaker, let me know. So if he agrees, maybe, I mean, $300 is hard to pass on for.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's got a little foot switch along with it. So you can channel switch. It's got a boost and you can switch the delay and the reverb, onboard delay and reverb, because they
As long as
collaborate.
it's working properly, right? If it's got
Yep.
like if it needs to be recapped or anything like that, it
Not,
can
not. I
often.
reckon it's probably always they need some contact clean on the pots because those are going to be scratchy from
It's
non-use.
not very old, is it? Like how old would that be?
2000s, early or mid
So
2000s.
probably just about due for a recap, but maybe not,
Yeah, no.
depending how
I've.
much it's been used.
I mean, this Soldano's 1993 and it's still got the original caps going fine.
Really
Yeah. Till it
awesome.
shows signs of sickness, then like I'll change them like that. But till then, there's no point in. I
But and it'll sound different with new caps in it,
It
unfortunately. So
will,
you want to
and
hold off as long as possible.
yeah, I've seen that actually because there's a friend of mine who had a nice early 70s Princeton, and that thing had like some serious, mojo or whatever you want to call it. And then it went in for a recap, and then it became like all, modern and stiff sounding. So, the sometimes I think like the slight imperfections kind of, make it harmonically more pleasing or whatever you want to call it, or
As long as
feels.
it's safe to run.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
sometimes if the caps are like leaking, then you have
Yeah,
to,
you don't want
but
smoke coming out of the amp, but if it's
yeah.
if it's running fine with, I mean, it was a studio amp. We weren't really using it on the road, so in case it blew in the middle of a take or something, we'd have other amps that we could use. But yeah, in the middle of a gig, you don't want that happen.
No, that's been one of my problems with my Bassman. It has been unreliable.
Okay.
It's been running for about 2 years now without an issue, but then I don't take it to many gigs now, Because, man, I had about 4 or 5 gigs in a row where that thing would just shit itself, and it drove me nuts. Because you'd be sitting there and you'd be going, well, now I've got no sound. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And Simon was the one guy who really got to the bottom of it because we went to about 3 or 4 other people before him, all who were very good, but none could kind of find it. And Simon actually found a washer that was floating around inside there.
Oh, damn.
And, it was kind of, it must have come off, it's been dropped in there or left in there or something. But it was floating around. And so when you'd move the amp, the washer would move around and then you'd turn it on and it would contact with something and then short something out. And so I'm hoping that was it, but I haven't tried it. I just don't trust it anymore. I want to take it to a gig and find that it just doesn't work, and then
Yeah.
I'm,
I mean, I'm sure it has like that old Fender sound, that
oh
it's
yeah,
supposed to have. But does it have the old Fender smell as well?
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean that guy Mark builds them exactly like the originals. He's even got the original machine that Fender used in the '60s to wind the Transformers.
Okay.
He bought that when Fender sold it, CBS sold it as part of the thing. So he bought the original machine. That's how obsessed that guy is with it. He's got to have everything
Yeah.
like as close as possible to the originals. Although he does change a few things. Like if it's like the death cap goes, there's none of that.
Yeah.
Nobody needs the death
No,
cap.
no, no. That's one thing like you have to do is get a three prong thing, and I think
Yep.
also you have to make sure the fuse is on the live and not the neutral, because very
Yeah, well, that's the
often,
death cap. They used to put a cap across the fuse
yeah,
so that if for some reason that cap went bad, that's why they called it the death cap.
yeah,
It would basically make the whole chassis live. So you
yeah,
touch it and
because
it's
they were
game
they were
over.
two
So
prong, right? So you didn't know which one was you. They had a 50-50 chance of
being
getting
either
the
one.
live
So
wrong.
when you
Yeah,
went to three prong, you could take that death cap out, and
out.
then you didn't have to worry about it. And that
Yeah,
was kind of one of the big ones that
exactly. In
you
fact, a lot
always
of
want to do.
people use that switch as like a modding thing, like negative feedback or something like that. You can put two different values, or maybe even a mid-range switch or something like that. Which I,
Which does actually make quite a big difference. Negative feedback is a big impact on the sound. I found
in
so.
fact, this
Yeah.
Marshall, it's got the Suhr thing where he puts that negative feedback knob at the back, so you can actually adjust how spongy and how bold it is. It's kind of interesting. Like you can actually almost kind of get it like almost tweed kind of sounding, like with that slightly broken up kind of thing on in the power stages. But the normally just around 12 is where I keep it. But I've turned it like all the way, you know, to where it gets like stiff and very percussive sounding.
Oh,
It's
cool.
good to have that. I mean, like not
Absolutely.
not every amp has a negative feedback control. And
And did you say we had some questions
we
earlier?
did actually. So I screenshotted some on Instagram. Some were like, "When is your next gig in so and so city?" So we were like, not
Yeah,
answer
go for it.
those. Here's a nice one. New Zealand bass players we should check out. Fantastic series. I've learned a lot. Now this is Leslie Charles, one of my favorite bass players from India. So he wants to know about any New Zealand bass players that he should be checking out. And I think you've got a few. I'll let you go first.
Sure. I mean, different in each city, but in Wellington, Johnny Lawrence is one of the guys. Probably the guy that's the busiest bass player around here. He doesn't really have a lot of an online presence. He's not really kind of that sort of guy, but he's on a bunch of records and really, really good player. He lived in Vancouver for a long time, so has that kind of thing, and both electric and acoustic.
Mm-hmm.
He's the bass player with Holly Smith and with um, everyone. Rob Ruha, Bella. He's the guy. He does all the orchestra gigs. Reads really well. Fantastic player in Auckland. There's Ollie Holland is someone I like a lot. Really good acoustic bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Just fantastic. In Christchurch, there's Michael Story. Mike plays really great. Yeah, various different people around, but probably the best bass player, two best bass players around in New Zealand are Benjamin Shepherd, who's moved back from Los Angeles. He was with Peter Erskine's band for a long time. He's on the Dr. Album, or Drum, Drum, Dr. Thought that was great. He's on that album. He's also with Monkestra and but he's on Kendrick Lamar albums and all kinds of stuff. That guy's been around. He's one of my favorite bass players. He's on my Reamped album. He's probably by just moving to New Zealand would be the best electric player here, without a doubt, by far. He's phenomenal. And on acoustic bass would be Tom Warrington, who he doesn't really play at the moment. Tom's got an issue with his hand, but Tom's an older gentleman, but Tom's been around, and I mean, Tom played a lot with Lyle Mays, and he played on. He played with Frank Sinatra, and Tom's played with everyone. He's pretty heavy, and I remember we had Mike League at the university,
Mm-hmm.
from Snarky Puppy, and Mike couldn't believe that Tom Warrington lived in Wellington. He was like losing his shit over that. He said when he went to North Texas, they used the Tom Warrington book to study how to play bass. Tom is legit a legend. You've heard him on countless classic records and a bunch of LA things. He was the Buddy Rich big band bass player
Okay.
for 20 years. So Birdland with Buddy Rich, that's Tom Warrington. Playing electric, but he primarily plays acoustic now. But he's got an issue with his hand. He's got one of those things where the kind of your hand goes like that rather than smoothly now.
Okay.
So he doesn't really want to play because he's a bit scared it's going to cramp up on him, and it's like lock finger or something it's called.
Okay.
And he's had it operated on, but it's not really working. But Tom is phenomenal soloist. He knows every tune known to mankind. You name anything, even something stupid. You think some silly little children's song that's kind of just for fun, and he'll know it, and he'll know the melody and be able to play you an amazing solo on the acoustic bass over it, or the perfect bass line, perfectly in tune with the right sound with a perfect groove. He's phenomenal. So that's probably my set of guys that first come to mind. What about you?
I love the guy from LAB. I think his name is Ara or Adam
Ara?
Turnti. Yeah, great bass player. Just holds the groove down, and you can tell he's got way more like there than he shows. But that groove is solid. Who was the bass player?
He used to play in the before you move on. He used to play in a band called Catch a Fire.
Yeah.
So if you see Catch a Fire, you can hear a lot of his bass lines in those reggae things. But prior to him, it was a guy called Rory McCartney in Wellington who was in LAB for a long time playing bass. And Rory is a really good bass player. Now the bass player in the Roger Fox Big Band.
Okay.
Although who knows what's going to go on with that. But he was the original bass player in LAB. And then Ara took over. And Ara's really very good. I think he's a great bass player. Sorry, keep going.
I was going to say the bass player from Trinity Roots. I think his name is Rio.
Rio? Yep. Rio's great.
Great.
Rio well.
I seem to like the guys who hold the low end down. Big solid bass lines, that sort of thing. There's a guy in Auckland I've played with a few times. His name is Russell. What's Russell's surname? It's a good question. But he's great. Nick Taylor's great.
Nick Taylor's great.
Yeah. Who else have I played with recently? There used to be a guy called Richard Murray who used to do some gigs
from the Rock Shop.
Yeah, he used to play with Midge Marsden. I remember it was the first time I played with him, man. It was like at rehearsal. And
Richard's great.
and
He's a great
I
guy.
think
And he's a groover.
exactly. I was going to say, man, it just felt like there was like a big blanket behind and you could just lean into it, that sort of thing. Like you could tell that, you didn't have to worry about. And he'd follow you, like when you're soloing, not every bass player is like listening to where you're going. And I caught up with him recently. We ran into each other. I was like, hey, man, I haven't seen him in ages. So it was lovely running into him again. Man, there's like a ton of great bass players, especially like in Auckland. Like it's almost like you random somewhere you'll find some great bass player playing there.
I actually think probably there's more good bass players than there are guitar players in Wellington. It sort of feels that way, Like I sometimes find it hard to find someone to sub for me on guitar because there's certain guitar players with certain skills, but whereas bass players, man, I can think of 10 of them straight off that I could call, and they'd all be great,
Oh, here's another one I should mention is Marika, who plays with Cora and Troy King.
Holly.
Yeah,
and Holly Smith. Yeah,
plays with a bunch of people. Actually, probably one of the most busiest bass players on the circuit. But definitely check out. I think her surname is
Marika. What's
Hodgkinson?
Hodgkinson.
Hodgkinson. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, Marika Hodgkinson. I think she's great too. I think she really plays well.
She's got a great groove, good melodic sense, and like.
To be honest, that's really what I want from a bass player is groove. I could care about any. They can play one note, and if it feels good, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I don't really care about all the rest of it. Just give me that.
Yeah.
That's what I like about playing with Ben Shepherd. You'd really like playing with Ben, because man, it's like big groove. He's loud, like he plays real loud, but and of course he's got nothing is too hard for that guy.
And ironically, like the one time we did get to play together, there was no bass player.
Yeah, there was. It was the left hand of the keyboard. Someone said that the other day on one of my YouTube videos. They said that you're really good, but you could do with a bass player. I was like, there is a bass player. It's the left hand of the keyboard.
Yeah, there's that old joke, right? How many bass players does it take to change a light bulb? And none. The keyboard player does it with his left hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I like both, Yeah. I mean, the organ trio thing is a big tradition in jazz music, so that's why I like the organ thing. But I also love playing with bass players too, especially if you play anything funky. The electric bass is just great. And then, of course, if you play jazz stuff, acoustic bass. Any more questions?
Yeah. How to use drive-in compressor for tones like yours. I think we actually spoke about that compressor thing earlier, so we may have addressed that one.
Hmm.
Any thoughts on the Walrus Audio ACS1? I don't even know what that is. So I think it's some kind of a newish pedal. I think we
I'll look
can
it up right
we can
now.
look it up right now. And ACS1. There's bloody new pedals coming out every day, right? Hard to keep.
Amp cab and simulator. I do know the one. The yellow pedal has bass, middle, treble across the top. Then the next row has volume, gain,
Oh,
and
okay.
room.
So it's like you pop that on your pedal board and you can go direct kind of a situation.
Yeah, exactly. So it has three cabs, left plus right, Fullerton, London, or Dartford. Right. So in other
Ah,
words, um, American, British, a couple of flavors of
yeah,
British.
like something like this Strymon Iridium or something like that, I guess.
It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
I think it's their version of it. I mean, I've never tried it, but I think the Walrus stuff is generally high quality.
yeah.
It's probably built like a tank. I've never, to be honest, I don't think I've ever played any of the Walrus stuff. I don't think I've ever tried any of it. But I believe it's built really well, and from what I've heard, they sound good. Looking at this here, it's $296, down from 400. So they're on special at the moment, and I'm assuming that's American dollars.
Okay.
So it's
Do they have
pretty
a?
pretty expensive, but maybe that's not compared to the Iridium or whatever. I'd say it's probably pretty good, but you've got lots of options. I mean, you've got the Iridium, you've got the ACS1, you've got the Tonex
Yeah.
one, you've got the full Tonex, which is really good too. Of course, you can get into the fractals or the helixes or the
Even
Kempers and
those
that kind of stuff too.
Universal Audio amp pedals. There's a whole
The
bunch of them.
Ruby or the
Yeah,
Dream
or the
65 and
Lion.
things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried the Dream 65. I didn't particularly like it. I wanted to like it. I tried the TC Electronic ones too. I quite liked the Marshall one. I didn't like the Fender one. I wanted to like the Fender one. But it's pretty cool to have those options now because you can have your regular pedal board and
Yeah.
then so you're going to go to a gig where you have to go direct, you put an amp pedal on the end and you're
Yeah.
good to go.
Or you can do what like I did on my pedal board. I put an HX stomp, so most of the time I use it for
Yeah.
effects. But should I need to go direct, I have that ability to. I used to use the HX effects earlier, and I sold that, and I got the HX stomp just because it had the amp models, and I have to say they sound pretty good. Especially for me.
That's what I'm going to do with my. Oh,
I was
sorry. So, gonna say that's what I'm going to do with my FM3.
oh yeah.
That's going to be on a board, and I'm going to use it as mostly effects, but also have it be able to use the amp modeling at times as well. But actually in conjunction with pedals. So it'll essentially be like people used to use those M9 pedals, where they were kind of a universal tool that does a lot of things. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to do it, and it sounds like that's what you're doing with the
Yeah.
Helix as well.
Yeah, and sometimes like just go direct out and then send the out without the speaker sim to an effects return of the amp, so you at least have that going on behind you. So that sort of situation. There's a question. What's the story behind the making of North Star, which is a Black Snow Blues song? I think I've told the story before, but very simply, my mom-in-law was visiting us, and I was sitting in my studio room playing guitar, and she's like, "Oh, do you mind if I come and have a listen?" She kind of likes listen to me play guitar. So she came and had a listen, and she's like, "Oh, I'm pretty curious. How do you write a song?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just sit down and like doodle on the guitar, and I wait for some like little nugget that seems like it has potential to pop out." And I was like, just doodling, and right then something popped out, which was just like, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So I just, put that down. And I said, maybe I'll do something with it later. And then we had like a band jam, I think the next day or the day after. So I was like, you should try, doing that. So we just ran that part. And then, I was listening to On Every Street by Dire Straits, where the chords are like that bit. So the chorus, I kind of like that move, which is like a D over F going to the F. So I came up with something which went like something like that. So we put those two bits together, and we're like, this is cool. Now we need a little bit of a jam or a breakdown kind of section. And sometimes when we used to come across like an impasse like that, we would just get the bass to, hold one
Mm.
root thing and then just start moving triads or some sort of, underlying chords like you would do on a piano. So something like that is what came about. And then you build that up as you go, and then you come back to the chorus at the end. And luckily, the drummer had one of those little Zoom portable recorders, and he recorded that first initial jam. And then later on, I listened to it. The solo I played over there was just like close your eyes and go for it kind of thing. Just react to as you go, and it turned out pretty well. It built up. So what I did is I went back and listened to it and actually transcribed that solo, learned it back and made a few improvements as you were, and played that on the final recording. So yeah, that's the brief story of that song. It turned out pretty well, and it's still a favorite. I don't think we'd be able to play a gig without playing that song. People will like start asking for money back or something.
Nice. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how it happens, isn't it, with writing songs? It's I was always told when I was growing up, the best way to write a song is at a piano. It's the most complete instrument, has the full range. I don't believe that at all anymore.
Mm.
I used to think that for the longest time, and then every time I get at the piano, I get frustrated because I can't do the things I want to do
Yeah.
in the ways I want to do, and my understanding of the instrument's kind of limited because I don't have facility on it. And then I get on the guitar and I'd be noodling around, like you said, and I'd stumble across something. Maybe sometimes even just a chord. I play something like that, and I go, oh, okay, now I've got an idea and I'm
Mm.
off. Do you know what I mean? Because this is my instrument. So I found the best stuff I write is that guitar, for sure. So in the same kind of way.
Yeah, I
Cool.
think in 5 years, the way to write a song is you go to that AI thing and say these are the prompts.
Yeah. Did you see that Rick Beato
I
video
just
today, I
did,
guess?
yeah. I think
Yeah.
in 5 years time, a lot of people are going to be out of work, sadly. But
Yeah.
you know,
I think it'll be pretty obvious though. I think people think it's going to be this thing where nobody will be able to tell.
hmm
I think it's the same thing now. You see a photo and even like little kids will be able to say that's photoshopped. And people are pretty good at photoshopping, right? There's
hmm
some people who can do it flawlessly,
yeah,
but 99 times out of 100 people can spot it because they know to spot it.
yeah,
And it's going to be the same thing with AI. I mean, Rick Beato was talking about how his kids, they've got pretty good ears,
yeah,
but they can spot the AI stuff straight away. And I think that's what's going to happen, right? It's just another tool,
yeah,
like anything else.
yeah. I mean,
We'll still have gigs, man. We'll do our 1 gig a year. It'll be fine.
I have an interesting take on the concept. I think over the last maybe couple of decades, music has become like so, at least the mainstream stuff is like so tuned and chopped into time, and it's like making humans sound like computers.
Yeah.
And computers can sound like computers better than humans can sound like computers. But if humans go back to sounding like humans, maybe they'll have you know, an
But isn't it
advantage.
interesting that if you look at the top songs at the moment, I remember Rick Beato doing a thing about this,
hmm
and he was talking about the top songs of them on Spotify or whatever it was. They were almost all throwbacks to 80s and 90s type stuff. So it was The Weeknd, who sounds like he might have been in the 80s or 90s,
Yeah.
and Dua Lipa, who was doing essentially disco. Because people are sick of that kind of stuff, I think. They're getting fed all this kind of real choppy, over processed, crappy, non dynamic kind of nothing music. That they're sick of that. So when they get a choice, like on Spotify or something, and they're going and they're choosing what music they're going to something that's essentially a throwback.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some nostalgia involved with that, but I think it's also people want they want a little more than what they're being offered with a lot of pop music now.
Have you watched that guy,
Yeah,
Ted Goya, on Rick Beato's channel?
he's great.
Yeah,
I knew him before Rick
yeah,
Beato's stuff because he's a well-known jazz academic. But yeah, definitely that's great.
yeah. Because he was saying like I feel sad for the modern generations because they don't really have music of their own. Like us, like every generation
Yeah,
had something new coming out that would totally, you know, wipe
maybe
out
they
what
do
came
though.
before.
Maybe they do. Like my daughter's generation and your daughter's generation, right? They'll have their music that will be nostalgic to them 20 years from now whatever it is that's
Yeah,
around
yeah,
now.
for
And it
sure.
might be crap. It might be something like, what's that guy that does the country song, and it's sort of the one
Wagon wheel.
fives wagon wheel,
I
and
knew it was
things.
that one.
It'll be something like that they'll look back on and they'll laugh and they'll put it on. They'll be like,
Yeah, I'm
oh,
sure.
it's that blooming song,
Yeah.
kind of like "Don't Break My Heart, My Achy Breaky
But
Heart" and
that
shit like that
there
when
were
we were
so many
kids.
more distractions apart from music, that occupies the
That's true.
like she watches a hell out of YouTube. And
Yep.
some of the stuff on YouTube there is singing, and I'm telling her like that's autotune. She's like, "How do you know it's autotune?" I'm telling her it's autotune. I can hear it, like I can hear autotune.
But
So
it's not just YouTube because at least YouTube is like there's some music involved. Some of it's not even, there's so many distractions. Things like video games. Video games are great fun, but some kids spend their whole days doing that.
yeah,
And I kind of think, well, maybe they are by osmosis absorbing some music, but I don't know.
that video game thing was like there in my generation as well. The technology may have been a bit more primitive, but it was still, oh, don't do too much of that. It's going to screw your brain up and all that stuff. And then you go and read studies. It says it actually improves your hand-to-eye coordination or some shit like that.
Yeah,
But I guess everything has to be done in moderation. Like
it's moderation. That's the
you drink
difference,
too
right?
much water, you'll die.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that is the thing is that kids, the stuff now is so stimulating to people's
Yeah.
brains that they get obsessed with it. And, to spend 6 hours on a video game of the stuff is just so intense. As much as spending 6 hours on YouTube, as much as spending 6 hours on anything really to do with that stuff. Movies, Netflix. My daughter will binge watch stuff on Netflix for 6 hours and think nothing of it.
Yeah.
And it's just all this information going into her brain, and it's, yeah,
I used to
it
play
was
guitar
simpler
for
when you
6 hours,
just,
I remember.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say it's much simpler when you just had to try and figure out all the inversions of an E minor chord.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe I don't know. It's a different time. They'll figure it out and
Yeah.
they'll work out their way through it. And same with the AI and all
I
those
mean,
sort of
I
things.
wish I had like all those YouTube lessons, as a kid, man.
I know. Tell me
I
about
would have
it.
been a bit better.
And a catalog like Spotify.
Yep.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, as much as I hate Spotify because of their business practice, to have access to any music you want at any time you want it,
Yeah.
that was unfathomable when I was learning to play. Just could not imagine what that would have been like. Maybe it wouldn't have been as good.
Yeah. I think
I
we
don't know.
actually valued every little bit of information a little bit more, you know.
I think so.
Yeah.
And because it took a long time to acquire it, you worked really hard to make sure you got the most out of that record.
Yeah. Totally.
Maybe, I don't know.
And even like finding new music, like someone would come and with an album like which you've never seen before, and then you'd listen to it like, oh, I like this one, or I hate this, or whatever. But at least you'd find, new music like that. There's this hilarious story. Like I used to go to Sunday school in church, and they had this one class called Rock to Ruin or something, and they had a bunch of bands that were considered evil or satanic or whatever, and the Beatles and the Eagles were on that list. So I was like, hang on,
Oh, yeah.
this can't be that bad. So I actually took that list to the local music store, and I was like, how many of these albums can you get me?
Yeah.
And then he,
Man, I saw this video the other day, though, speaking of the Eagles,
yeah,
a guy, an English guy, and someone had sent him, this guy's into analyzing music, someone had sent him to the Eagles doing Desperado 1 year, and then and the following
I
year,
saw that.
completely different concert.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yeah.
It's amazing, and he used AI to strip the vocal out, and then he put both vocals through Melodyne or whatever,
Yeah.
and drew out the graph of it, and it lined up
Yeah.
exactly.
He reckons they're
And
lip
he even
syncing.
Yeah, totally. Because he tried singing the line and then he sang it 2 seconds afterwards and he could not match it even one phrase exactly because there's some variance, even just a
Yeah.
little bit. Because this lined up almost exactly over a period of time and it was he's like, they're lip syncing. And I kind of think that's a real shame when bands do stuff
Yeah.
like that. Because you'd pay a lot of money to go and see the Eagles. There's not cheap tickets,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And if you can't sing it well, don't go and do live gigs. You know what I mean? It's sort of, yeah, it's a bit of a cop out if you ask me. If that's true,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, they lost me when Don Felder left. That was my
yeah,
guy in the band, and he wasn't there
for sure.
anymore. I'm sure,
Yeah, Joe Walsh just was never quite the same, was it?
yeah. I mean,
I mean, he was great, but
he's cool, but it was nice when he had that foil, that raw kind of, almost unpolished thing with that very precise, very melodic guitar playing. I don't think Felder ever hit a bum note in his life. He seems like that kind of guy. Uh,
exactly.
so it was nice to see them, both, play off each other. And I don't know, I guess like I grew up listening to all the Felder's guitar parts on those albums, and
Oh yeah,
like pretty much gained an insight on what a good studio player should be by just listening to, like every single note mattered, and it was in place, that sort of thing.
it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, Andrew Cogan is his name,
Hmm.
and he I don't know if you know Cogan. He lives in Auckland. He's a singer, songwriter,
I think
a
I may
bit of
have run
acting.
into him.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Name
so
sounds
his
familiar.
brother is Phil Cogan, but his brother goes by Keegan when he's in the US, and he's on that show, The Amazing Race. He's the
Okay.
presenter and what have you. So Andrew Cogan, we call him Cogs. He was hanging out with his brother, and he said, "Oh, you want to go out to dinner tonight?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So he just took him out to the restaurant. My friend Don's gonna come to dinner with us, and it was Don Felder. And he was like, "Wow!" And he said to me, "Have you heard of this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Who
Are you
hasn't?
kidding? Like
Yeah,
the Eagles? Like, yeah. The solo to Hotel California, he's
yeah,
one half of that,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, he wrote the
Crazy.
song.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's pretty unique chord progression, and I used
It's
to always
fantastic.
struggle to play the intro, and then I realized it's capo on the and you play E minor, because apparently he wrote the song in E minor, and Don Henley's vocals needed a different key, so they had to actually change
Oh,
the whole.
I
And
didn't
he's
know that.
saying it went from like this big, guitar open E thing, and suddenly like it started sounding much, much smaller. And it's kind of
Mm,
weird. Like you always, think of it as being in B minor, but it's kind of
mm.
you hear it in E minor, and suddenly like, ah, now I know how he's. And that's why.
I knew it was a capo because you can sort of hear that it sounds like especially
Yeah, you
like that
can't
bit
play it
you
like that.
hear.
It's
You can't really. It
you
doesn't sound
do
right,
it
you know.
here, right? So it's like the
Yeah,
old
exactly.
style B7.
Hmm.
Then see that chord there. Um, Maybe
Yeah.
Don Henley's gonna send us a copyright strike if we play anymore.
Man, I've had a few of those lately. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
I had one. I did a YouTube live video at the Sports Awards thing, and I just chucked my phone up. I got 6 copyright
Holy
notices on
shit.
there. I got two different copyright not strikes, just notices.
Yep.
It's the ones where there's no impact, but they put an ad in the front or whatever, and they. But I got 2 different copyright notices for the same song
Wow.
by 2 different artists. I'm like, well, you can't both own it. You know what I mean? Somebody owns it, and I was like, this is rubbish.
Have you ever got a
But
copyright claim for your own song?
have I? Not one of mine personally, but one of the Roger Fox big band,
Okay.
which I played on. And I got a copyright notice for that. And I was like, I've even played guitar on this, of course. And I had Roger's permission to use it, but I was like, it's not even worth it in that instance.
Yeah.
But I did get one that was interesting for the version I did of Georgie Porgy.
Okay.
The Toto
Yep.
thing. I
Yep.
did an instrumental version of it on YouTube, and I got a YouTube notice from the Hindley Street Country Band. I don't know if you know them.
No.
They're like an Australian. Oh, sorry, they're an Australian covers band.
Okay.
So I'm like, they're doing a cover of a Toto song. They can't be claiming my cover of a Toto song.
Yeah.
So I contested that one. And it took 30 days, and then it just drops off. They've
Yeah.
got 30 days, so they let it go. But I was willing to fight that one because I
Yeah.
thought, man,
It's
on
ridiculous.
principle alone, they don't own the song. It's a cut. Theirs is a cover of someone else's, and mine's a cover of someone
Yeah.
else's. So,
You know,
but that stuff's got out of control now. It's really bad.
here's a bit of a gray area. You know that Joe Cocker version of "With a Little Help from My Friends" is
Sure.
totally different from the Beatles one, right? Now, if you end up doing the Joe Cocker version, it's still going to be, a Beatles song, but there's no credit or arrangement credit that you could claim, right? So even
Yeah,
if you do
exactly.
make a definitive change in it, which then becomes like now the new de facto standard or whatever, you still don't see any of that.
I got one for that. We did a version of Crossroads, and Crossroads is a Clapton tune,
Hmm.
right? Well, I mean, technically, it's not even that, right? It's
It's
a
Robert
Robert
Johnson,
Johnson
yeah.
tune, but we played it like Clapton, right?
Yeah.
We did the all that stuff, right? And I got a copyright claim from Rush.
Oh,
And I was like, it's not even their tune, right? Like
what did
it's
Rush
Robert
ever
Johnson
cover
first. They
Crossroads?
must have covered it as well. So I contested it, and then they denied. They Universal Music didn't didn't back down.
Oh.
They held fast on their claim. Then what happens with YouTube if you want to contest it further to say no, this is a mistake?
Hmm.
That's when you run the risk of it being upgraded to a copyright strike. You get
Right.
3 copyright strikes and they cancel your
Yeah.
channel. So I was like, oh, come on. I'll bet you they know that I'm not willing to pursue it further for that reason,
Hmm.
But it was a bit crappy. So I was like, Rush don't own this.
Yeah.
It's not their version of the song. But they probably did do a cover of it too, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Have you
But I
heard
thought that
the?
was crappy of Universal Music Group.
It's probably someone over there who's just bloody power tripping or something like that.
Well, it's about money, isn't it?
That or the
If they do that on a
algorithms gone mad. Yeah.
But well, they would have been notified of it, and then they had the choice to either drop it or continue it, and they
Mm.
continued it. And they probably do that. Know that if they have 1,000 videos that have that, even if they only make $30 per video,
Hmm.
30 times 1,000 is $30,000. So they're willing to do it.
Right.
Which is bad practice, but such as is. Yeah.
I was going to say that the John Mayer version of that song's pretty interesting. He's using that Cornish fuzz with the starved voltage, so it sounds like it's about to die any moment. And if you've heard that
Oh
one,
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah, I
quite
have.
a unique tone. Um, with,
Fuzz pedals often sound better with old batteries in them too, right?
yeah, it's because
For that reason.
that and the resistance of the battery apparently. Because when Eric Johnson started saying that he could hear the difference between carbon batteries and alkaline, everyone thought he was mad. And then they found that you could actually measure the effect of each type of
Yeah, but he
battery.
also claimed he could hear the brand of battery.
Yeah, which is
You know what I
probably
mean?
what he was
It's
talking about. He's saying that like the ever-ready ones, not the Duracells, and the Duracells I think were alkaline or something like that.
uh,
That could be
I
it.
thought it was more like both alkaline but two different brands. I was like,
That's a bit, I don't know.
maybe.
Yeah, but apparently those ever-ready ones, the black ones with the cat jumping through the nine or whatever,
Yep.
those are the nice ones in the fuzz. If you look at all those boutique builders, those are the batteries they put in the fuzz. So I just
I mean, the thing now people use is just use your Voodoo Labs or whatever with the sag on it,
Yeah,
right?
but that doesn't apparently do the same thing. It's dropping the
Really?
voltage, but the current drop doesn't happen. So there was
Oh,
some other circuit or something that mimicked it or whatever. But I was like, man, just if you really care that much, you put the battery in the pedal. It's
yeah.
easier. Or
I think Josh Smith does that. He has
or a
a
battery
little
box.
battery
Yeah.
battery box that holds 4 batteries or something, so you're not going to run out on a gig or
That's what
something. And that's
apparently Landau and stuff were doing in the 90s. Bob Bradshaw used to build those battery boxes into the rigs, and I think Mason from Vertex took it one step further, and he, um, when you power off your pedal board, he got the batteries to switch off, which is
oh,
convenient, so you don't
that's a
have
good
to go
idea.
and physically put the switch off or whatever. Yeah.
Did we have any more questions, or is that
I
all of them?
think I just let that story run for very little time, so not that many coming, but I'll do it in a little bit more in advance. And if you are watching this YouTube video and you would like us to check out your question, do feel free to leave it in the comments. And I think we're pretty good for time today.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think we're just about at an hour now.
yeah.
So,
So we should
and
wrap
what have you
today.
got coming up? You got any good gigs around the corner?
There are some, I think, early next month that are lined up, but as of now, I've got a couple more studio recordings to finish off. People have sent some tracks. I played a song the other day, which I actually had to write a chord chart for a couple of sections, which was nice. just keeps you on your toes. Otherwise, it's like, oh, I know how that's gonna go. The changes are like so predictable, you don't even have to write them down. I used to do that in like some Bollywood sessions. I would sit over there, would just like write numbers, that's 1, 4, 6 as you go. But yeah, I kind of like when the chords give you ideas to do something different. Otherwise, sometimes you've played that same progression so many times, you kind of recycle some of the ideas
Oh,
from
totally.
the
Yeah,
past,
tell
and
me
you're
about
like,
it.
oh, I need to do something new here. You can't keep on playing the same old. So yeah, and then sometimes you surprise yourself as well. Like, oh, I didn't know, like, I could think that fast or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, it's great, man. Cool.
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 So yeah,
All right.
we'll see
Well,
each other again sometime next week, hopefully. And
absolutely.
till then, stay tuned. See ya. Bye bye.
Cheers.